Only 1 month after their last blockade, the Algonquins of Barrier Lake are back at the front lines of their struggle. Located 3 hours north of Canada's capital of Ottawa, the Indigenous community's fight with the government has been escalating since last March, when they say the government imposed a coup d'etat on their reserve. This is Leah Terchansky with the Real News Network, Independent World Television, outside of Barrier Lake, the reserve located by Rapid Lake. We're here with
Norman Matchwan.
And what's your role in the community, Norman?
I'm a youth spokesperson here.
And why are you blockading this road?
We are blockading this this highway, for the governments to, to negotiate with our community, because they signed provincial and federal signed a 1991 trilateral agreement with our community for the community to have a say in the management of our traditional territory. Right now, the forestry, the logging is suspended, but again, they're coming in, making logging roads, cutting logging roads so they can start cutting soon. So again, they're not consulting with our community.
The blockade was meant to draw attention to the situation at Barrier Lake and was strategically timed to coincide with the Quebec provincial elections. Set up at 7 a.m. on November 19th, the blockade was removed by the provincial police, Sécurité de Québec. Several organizations have launched an investigation into this police body's treatment of Indigenous issues. By 2 p.m., riot police were dispatched. Removing the community off the highway, they pushed it down the access road onto the reserve, after having arrested all but one of the community's leaders and spokespeople.
The folks that were doing the blockade, or the presence on the highway,
okay,
they were sort of pushed off by the uniformed officers.
Okay.
And then all of a sudden, there was some pushing a little ways away from me. I couldn't see it clearly, and they pulled him away, and then they had him on his back, and they were pulling him on his back.
Get back in there! Get back in there! Get back! Get back! Get back!
4 to 5 police officers were on him and holding him down.
Sonny?
Yeah.
Okay.
And he was yelling. It sounded like they were hurting him. At one point, they were walking along the road, and they 2 or 3 of them broke ranks, ran ahead, and grabbed Benjamin, and then pulled him back, and they arrested him.
Shame on Canada!
Tensions with the government have been escalating. 1 month before this blockade, the Algonquins attempted to blockade the highway but were met with riot police and tear gas. 9 people were arrested. The Real News spoke to their policy advisor, Russell Diabo, about the roots of the conflict and the legal battle.
When I started working with the community in the mid-1980s, Barrier Lake was having impacts through large scale as logging roads were opening up the territory. Non-natives were being allowed in to hunt, fish, and game for sports uses, which led to more competition for fish and game for the community, and impacted their ability to put food on the table. And on top of that, this area had been flooded before by 2 huge storage reservoirs being built out of their lakes. They wanted to have a say in their territory. They'd been trying to do that for decades. So in 1989, the Algonquins of Barrier Lake blocked 6 logging roads, and that led to discussions with Quebec about how the territory was being managed and the fact that they weren't being consulted at all in any of the developments occurring on their territory.
In 1991, the provincial government of Quebec and the federal government of Canada signed a trilateral agreement with the Algonquins. It wasn't until 2 years later that the province began acting on the agreement. After completing the first phase of collecting research on the resources available on the traditional land, the government stalled on the proposed recommendations to continue the process.
The government of Quebec has been sitting on those recommendations for over 2 years now. And our understanding is that they have problems with the co-management and the revenue sharing. But in 2001, the federal government walked away from all of the agreements, the Memorandum of Mutual Intent, the Trilateral Agreement, the special financial provisions that they had negotiated.
The Real News spoke to Pierre Nepton, Associate Regional Director General of Indian and Northern Affairs Canada, about why the government walked away from negotiations.
When we ended our funding of this pilot project was after having spent $5 million, and of course, taking into account that there was no end result that we could foresee for the future. We were asking for schedule and deadlines and results, and unfortunately, there was no one to give us that kind of, let's say, commitment.
A rift in the community led to a small group to break off. According to the Algonquin's customary governance code, recognized by the federal government in the 1997 Memorandum of Mutual Intent, leaders are chosen by an elders' council. The faction, led by Casey Ratt, was not. Yet in January, the government decided to acknowledge the minority group, leading to a leadership crisis on the reserve. During the blockade, Norman Matuan spoke on the effect this has had on his community.
They ousted our customary chief and council and put in place, a minority group, which the majority of the community do not support. They're doing that as a divide and conquer tactic.
They are going through a lot of hardship because they're not getting programs and services. Many of them, in order to get programs and services from the federal government, they're being told they have to recognize the leadership of Casey Ratt.
Laurier Riel was appointed as a mediator to understand what actually happened with the leadership crisis. And in his report, he stated, "I cannot guarantee, therefore, that the Elders' Council was advised or that proper notification for a leadership review was carried out according to the regulations." You were quoted in an Ottawa Citizen article as saying, "We were satisfied by their leadership process and we recognized the new council."
The second point, the fact that he put a paper saying that doesn't mean either that the process wasn't followed. He just said that he cannot testify to he cannot testify if the process was followed.
During this month's blockade, the police arrested the traditionally selected chief, Benjamin Nodaway. To date, he is still held in custody. Community spokesperson Rose Nodaway, her daughter Mindy Nodaway, and supporter Louisa Worrell were also arrested at the blockade. Earlier in the day, police arrested volunteer teacher and youth representative to the Tribal Council, Marilyn Pukashish. Marilyn's husband was banned from returning to the reserve by Maniwaki police due to his involvement in a previous blockade. Rosa's husband, Eugene, was arrested the following day.
This is what the Canadian government is trying to do to any leader in our community. They're trying to criminalize them. They can do that, but our community, the majority of the community, will keep coming back. They're going to have to arrest us all and criminalize all of us, but that's not going to stop us. We're going to continue.
This is the sort of thing we can build right now without anyone else's permission from the government or from the business community. It's the power's in our hands.
If we're not going to sleepwalk into more wars and into environmental disaster, we think we need to start with a television news network that won't bow to pressure and has the courage to seek facts. And that means independent economics. And that's why we need you.
Real hope means facing a complex reality. Your tax-deductible donation makes it possible. Please contribute. Visit therealnews.com.